Good morning, everybody. It's Richard De Silva here at Banyard Solutions, welcoming you to the ePermits webinar, Permit to Work from Home. I'm noticing on my screen that the number of attendees is still flicking through and it's going up. So I'm just going to give it one more minute before we actually kick off, just to allow anybody that's trying to log in at the last minute to join us. So just bear with me for 1 minute. Okay, the ticker's stopped running through, so we're going to start, and our subject of today's webinar is Permit to Work from Home. There's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek there, but with current environment, with COVID-19 and so forth, there is a lot more working from home, but obviously some activities are very difficult to do that. We want to explore how e-permits can help keep people safe as well by helping them actually meet the requirements that have been put down in terms of best practice. So we all know, we've seen it and heard it so many times on the TV, that best practice is social distancing, trying to stay a minimum of 3 meters apart. In the work environment, obviously you wear the appropriate PPE for the job in hand, but these days there may be additional things that you may need to have or would prefer to have, such as gloves or a face mask, and you need to avoid physical contact with other items that other people may have touched, and of course wash your hands regularly. But in our world, the FM world, it's actually imperative that key sites such as hospitals, data centers, financial institutions, etc., they all remain operative and fully maintained and working so that when everyone comes back, there are no issues to actually go through. And one of the things we have noticed is that because their buildings have been fairly empty, that a lot of organizations are actually ramping up their maintenance side of things, bringing things forward so they can actually get it done while the place is empty and making it easier. So it's actually having a sort of an inverse effect at times. But the issue is then that it means people have got to get together to do these sort of things. You can only maintain these sites if people are working and interacting together, and it makes the guidelines difficult to follow. Paper changes hands, pens change hand, tools, hand washing regularly isn't easy. Companies just can't stick hand washing stations every 10 meters within a building and within the areas that people need to work in. And trying to work at least 3 meters apart can be pretty well impossible in many situations. But we've got some enhancements that we're bringing out very, very soon in the next couple of weeks within ePermit. Some of the ones that we'll talk about are already here. There are some new ones that are coming through that we'll take you through later on in the process that are really geared around helping people cope with this current crisis, and then you can flip back later on, or you may find, as we're finding ourselves, I'm still working probably harder than I was before, but most of my stuff's now online, and a lot of people are actually enjoying the ability to do online demonstrations and online meetings rather than traveling to wherever in the country for a 1-hour meeting and then traveling all the way back. So there are going to be changes, and we might see some of these changes sticking when it's all done. So what sort of enhancements and e-permits can actually help these situations? We want to try and avoid the unexpected. So what I've called there, no more, can I have a permit for this morning, please, mate, activities. The e-permits workflow tends to push contractors into submitting permit requests in advance. You can specify how far in advance that you want these things to be done. So they need to submit them before that time. If they don't submit them within that time frame or sort of outside of that time frame, they'll get a warning to say this may be rejected, and you'll get warnings to say that it's within your preferred lead time. So it gives you the chance to prepare your environment and the process of managing the work. No more paper permits. The e-permits electronic signatures module, which has been around now for probably about 18 months, enables a paperless process, but we're now adding some more refinements to that process where there'll be no more even pens changing hand or no more sharing devices. So that what that means is you could not be in the same place at the same time. You know, forget social distancing. You could now be in your office issuing a permit while the contractor is on site accepting the permit. You can go through the safety checklists together um, without actually having to be in the same place at the same time. So all these concepts have sort of come from a customer base speaking to us about how they can try and manage their environment in the current crisis and still maintain a level of health and safety compliance that they feel is necessary, irrespective of the environment. And no more PPE not adequate in the current circumstances. The e-permits PPE module allows you or the contracts to add PPE in the list that would normally appear in the RAMs. So if you're doing a particular job for which you have RAMs, you may specify that you must have hard hat, safety boots, a visor, and whatever. But in the current situation, you may also want to insist that while this crisis is on, that gloves and face masks are worn as well. Now, do you really want to go to the level of modifying the RAMs, every RAMs to take effect of this standard change that you want to bring in, that in hopefully 2-3 months' time may be relaxed and we may not need to go down that path? In the e-permits PPE module, it not only specifies the items that are within the RAMs, but you can also add additional PPE items for a specific situation that may exist on site that wouldn't normally require those items. So an example of an enhanced remote workflow could be, you can input a preferred lead time for a permit request. It's not a hard block, it just warns contractors that they're trying to submit a permit request in less time than is preferred. They're warned and you're warned in the approval process, and you can reject permits or you can accept them. You'll see in the short demonstration that I'll run that I'll show how this flags up, but I can agree that I actually want to override that particular rule that we have in the system, because it's really convenient that the contractor does it in less time than I've specified. You can electronically go through safety checklists now with mobile phone video link. And this is nothing to do with e-permits. This is a method that some of our customers have started to adopt, whereby the person that's going to actually issue the permit is actually sitting in their office. The contractor's on site. They make a telephone call or a WhatsApp video link or whatever Instagram video link, and the contractor shows what the site of work is looking like. And if there are any safety checklists they need to go through for maybe doing, I don't know, hot works or electrical works, they can actually go through that safety checklist and on the video show that this has been switched off, this has been turned on, this has been opened, and so forth. When you go through that safety checklist and you're ticking the boxes at your desk in the office, and the contractor is going around checking and is comfortable that everything that needs to be done has been done, the contractor then records that video and is requested to email it to you. So you've completed the checklists. You both sign the permit document. So you would sign it as the issuer. The contractor would be able to sign it as the receiver. And then you request that email is request that recording is emailed to you or sent to you via whatever media you're using. Once you've received it, you're then able to upload that into e-permits, and you can then issue that permit. So everything is then in place. Safety checklists have been done, site inspections have been done, and so forth. Once completed, you've got another video link to check everything's been done properly. You go through the close checklist with the contractor, and again, both electronically sign for closure of the permit. And two people not in the same place at the same time. Now, obviously, there might be iterations or variations on that depending on your own circumstances. This is just an example. But it does actually show that we have now got capabilities within the system, so you can do this remotely. or from your office, even if the work is being done downstairs. You don't actually need to be standing next to the contractor, handing them your tablet or your phone or your pen to sign things, and then they're handing it back to you. So it's just adding that little bit of extra safety and precautions into the process. So what we'll do now is we'll actually look and see how this process works in reality. Okay. So here's the scenario. I'm a contractor. You need me to come to site, and I'm going to raise a permit request. Now, of course, you can raise permit requests on behalf of contractors, or you can get contractors to raise permit requests themselves. And it's usually a mix of both with most e-permits clients. But you can ask me to come in and do a particular piece of work. I shall make the request. You'll approve it because I will be sending it to you in advance of the days that I'm actually going to do the work, so you've got time to approve it. Then we'll go through the scenario. When it comes to issue, we're not actually going to be in the same place at the same time for part of that process. So I will arrive at the security desk and the permitting desk, and in that situation, I can sign for permits, and the permit issuers will sign for those. But as an AP, when it comes to doing the high risk work, I may be sitting in my office upstairs while you're downstairs in the entrance hall or in the basement or at the place of work, and we can go through that process. So I'm the contractor. I'm logging in to the permit system, and I'm going to create a request. So first of all, which site am I coming to work on? I'm coming to work at this one called Custom Office, and I'm coming in to work for the FM team. If I've got a works order number, I can pop that into the system, and now I specify who the competent people are and who's coming in on the team. This is my company, Specialist Contractor, so I'm the administrator for Specialist Contractor Limited. I wouldn't normally see this button. This is only for me in demo modes that I can jump from one contractor to another. One contractor cannot see any content belonging to another contractor. They can't actually even see which other contractors that you use on site. Okay, so I'm going to pick a competent person called Steve. I'm going to send a chap called Frederick to go with him. And we've got car registration number, which is optional. We're going to come in and do the work on Thursday. We'll start at 9. We'll finish on the same day, and we'll finish at 5. Now, the system does understand shifts. So if you have rules that talks about splitting up packages of work into shifts, the system can automatically do that for you. So I just need to put in the overall time frame. But just for simplicity, this is going to be a one-day job. And that's where I'm starting. Now, for those of you that have seen e-permits before, you'll remember that in the past, we've submitted lots of RAMs to you that you've gone through the approval process. So these have all been approved within the system. My building itself consists of a number of floors. So it's 6 floors, a basement, a roof level, an external area. We've got a whole host of different location types within the system. And these are certain locations that are just set up in my demonstration system. We have a number of services, all the different things that we have within the building, and we have a list of activities. So the scenario is specifically, you've told me to come in and you want me to weld a plate onto a particular boiler. If I go to my list of items, there's boiler 1, that's what you've asked me to come in and fix. And you'll notice that when I select that item, the system has automatically now populated other fields within the system, because e-permits in the configuration process knows that boiler 1 is lives in this room called boiler room 2149, which is in the basement. So the system can automatically pick these up, and this is really important when it comes to identifying things like clashes. But we'll cover those in a minute. So what am I coming in to do? I'm coming in to do some repair work. And I'm going to be doing, I could obviously put a lot more information in there, but the location information, everything else is already pre-populated for me. So I'm just going to put a very short statement in there. Why is the work going to be done? It's a fault that's been identified to me. Now, if I go back to my RAMs, there's now been reduced down from that list to just one that actually meets that, because within e-permits, RAMs are location and service specific. Sorry, activity and service specific. So I couldn't pick the wrong RAMs for a particular job. So having completed that, these now at the bottom here are the special risks. So these are all the different activities that we could be doing. I'm going to be doing welding and brazing. I could be working in a confined space, or I could be working above plant or on steps and ladders, a whole range of different things. But just for simplicity, I'm just going to tag welding and brazing. You'll notice the system has also tagged asbestos, and I can't click on that and remove that. Now, this again is because the system understands where asbestos, if you have an asbestos issue, where asbestos is located in the building. So if I'm actually going to work in an area where there is potentially asbestos, it'll flag it up for me, put all sorts of warnings on the permit, and also ask the question, is the fabric of the building going to be disturbed? If it's not, I can go ahead with the warnings on the permit document. If it is, then it will go through a whole host of other checks, making sure that my company is a certified asbestos company, and that every individual on the team is properly qualified in all the activities for asbestos management. So we've ticked all of those, and we can now go to the next step. And what I've got is I've got a compliant permit request, because the button here is red. So that means all the training and competency and inductions for the people here on that list are all in place for the work that's going to be done. Here's the warning about the lead time. The internal rule that the client has put into e-permits here is that they really want all permit requests to be submitted no less than 72 hours before the work starts. Now, it's just warned me here, I can still submit this request because it's not a hard block. Because as I said earlier, I may get a permit request as an approver and go, wow, if they can do it tomorrow, that's really great. Yes, please. I'm happy to override that. And providing everybody in the organization accepts that and approves that permit request, the permits will be approved. If one person doesn't approve, the whole thing would need to be rejected. So this is information then about the permits. This is showing the tasks that are going to be done. This is where we can add PPE. So you could specify, for example, there will be standard pieces of PPE. So this list could be pre-populated because everybody has to wear safety boots, safety helmets, and high-vis jackets. So that could be pre-populated so that every time anyone is coming on site, they have to be wearing that. But obviously for doing this particular activity, we're going to be wearing visors as well. So I now submit that permit request. I've done all of my job. It says it's going to be an access permit from 9 till 5 on Thursday. And when am I actually going to do the hot works? Now, obviously, it can only take place on that day because that's the day of the permit. And it's going to be about a 1-hour job, but I'm going to put a 2-hour window in there just to make sure I'm playing on the safe side. So I can now submit that permit request, and my job as the contractor is now completed, and I've now got some requests sitting out there awaiting approval. Now, at this time now, emails are actually winging their way to the appropriate approvers, and one has just arrived here now. So this email has now arrived to a chap called Howard Albury, and it says that there's a new permit request. It's going to be need for assessment. It's welding a plate on a boiler, and these are the 2 permit numbers. And if I click on that link below, it will open up the required screen for me. And it's on. So it's on the other browser here. So there's Howard Albury's email address. His password's already been completed in there. So as Howard now, I'm logging in, and I'll be able to see those permit requests along with everything else that lives in my domain. So as Howard, I may be responsible for one building, I may be responsible just for a room, or I may be responsible for a whole estate. Whatever my domain is, this is the activity for my domain. So I've got some RAMs awaiting approval. I am a RAMs approver. So I've got some stuff sitting there that needs to go through my approval process. I've got some draft requests initiated by myself. Could be things like isolations or internal jobs that our own internal team do. Here I've got my requests awaiting approval. Here's jobs that have been approved that haven't been started yet. I've got a list of jobs that are overdue for issue. So why have I got jobs overdue for issue? Did the contractor not turn up? Are they doing the work without an issued permit? Need to investigate that. Open permits. I've got one open permit out there at the moment, so there is activity happening in my domain today. And I've got no open high-risk permits and nothing overdue for closure. So if I go to my requests awaiting approval list here in Custom Office, and you can see here that Howard is actually responsible for 4 sites. If I just bring it down to Custom Office, it'll now reduce that down. So these are the activities, these are the permit requests that have come through from Specialist Contractor. So let's say I'm the approver for access permits. If I'm only an approver for access permits, I could still view a hotworks permit, but I wouldn't be allowed to approve it. Woo. I wouldn't be allowed to approve that permit. So if I look at now the access permit, first thing it will actually show me are clashes. So it throws up 3 potential types of clashes within e-permits. The first one are what we call location clashes. So this is work taking place in the same place at the same time. We have service clashes, work taking place on the same piece of kit at the same time, and dependent service clashes. Classic example there would be, for example, in data centers. You can't take key power units out of action in one data center if it's already being done in another, because you need to maintain failover and so forth. So you can set up whatever dependent service links that you want, and it means you can identify clashes. Now, the system identifies clashes. It doesn't actually take any actions based on those clashes, because actions are for the human being to make a decision on. So I could go and review these other permits, and I can then make a decision as to whether or not I'm happy for these jobs to take place at the same time in the same place. I'm going to be happy for that, so I'm happy. Here's the information about who's coming. There's Steve Chandler and Frederick on the team, and that's Steve's mobile number. There's my warning that this is insufficient lead time, but I'm actually happy they can do this on Thursday. It's a big benefit to me. So I'm going to approve this, but anybody else in the approval list, so the Hotworks approvers, if any one of those decide they don't want this to go ahead because of the lead time, the whole permit request will be rejected. This is telling me what's on. This is so I can go and view the RAMs. I can bring in all sorts of isolations in the process. So if I bring in, for example, a fire systems isolation, it gives me a new form to fill out that will enable me to create another isolation. So it's going to be myself and my company doing it. We're going to be actually doing the work as well. The person that's going to do it is me, and I'll have Jean-Pierre in working with me. I'm going to turn it off at 9:30 and turn it back on at 4 o'clock. What service is going to be isolated? So I can got the fire alarm devices and so forth. So you go down through the form filling it out. What it does, it actually creates a new permit request. So I won't do that in its entirety for the moment, just to keep it simple. But it creates a new permit request, and that permit request will then be routed internally to the correct people within my organization who will do the isolations and approve those isolations. So it's a new permit document that will be in there. So is a safety escort required? Yes, I want to display that on the permit, and yes, a safety escort is required for this particular job. There's a list of PPE that's coming in. I actually want them to be wearing a face screen as well, and gloves. So while they're on site, I'm adding these in. Now, I may be providing these to the contractors when they turn up as part of this whole process with regard to protection against the COVID-19 outbreak. So this is where it's in a temporary manner. These 4 items are mandatory for the work that I'm going to do. these are ones that I want to add in optionally, and they'll all appear now on the permit document. So when we go through a checklist when the contractor arrives, we can make sure they've got everything that's necessary. I can add some special requirements. So I can say, for example, beware others in the same location. So that will appear on the permit, warning me that there are other people working in the same place because of the location clash that I saw above. And now if I'm happy to approve this permit, I can approve, and my job as the approver is done. That access permit is now an approved document. Similarly for Hotworks could go to a number of different people, so it's not just one sign-off. It might need 2 or 3 different sign-offs. Someone technical, someone from health and safety, and maybe the site manager all need to give their tick of approval in this process. Here I can see again all the same information that we saw before. I can see that the access permit has been approved. This one is still awaiting approval. Bring in an isolation should I want to, although obviously for Hotworks, I'm only looking at bringing in fire systems isolations. This is the safety checklist that appears on your current permits. So whatever your safety checklist is, it can be replicated within the system so that your permit documents have exactly the same information on them as they do now. In fact, if you have templates of your permit documents, we can recreate them in the permit system. And that means that your documents that get spat out at the back end look and feel exactly the same as the current documents that you use. There's the PPE list. I'm happy with that. If I wanted to reject a permit, I have to give a reason, and I have to also type information in the box, because when I reject it, an email will go back to the contractor saying that the permit's been rejected for these following reasons. They could then reaccess the permit, make changes, it might be dates, times, or whatever, and then resubmit those permit requests. They need to go through that process because they might find that if I'm doing it now on Saturday rather than Thursday, guess what? Frederick's training might have expired on Friday. So it will go through all of those safety checks every time a permit request is requested. If I'm happy to approve, I can approve that permit. And we now got that sitting in the approved permits bundle, and there they are, the 2 permits. So now if we fast forward, and it's now Thursday morning, contractor now arrives at site. So I am now taking the role of the FM guy in the booth where the contractors arrive. And first of all, they've shown me the permit number, and I know that permit number is valid. So now I'm in the process of wanting to issue these permits. So in this simple scenario, I'm standing behind the desk, behind the screen, and the guy's wanting his permit. So first of all, are you two guys on the permit? Guess what? Frederick's not turned up. They've sent somebody else. I can go in and I can edit that team. Frederick might have been ill, couldn't make it to the day. They've sent somebody else in exchange. And now the system will now rerun all of those security checks to make sure that the new person on the team is fully trained and qualified. If they are, the name just gets changed on the permit request, and you can then issue that permit and everything has been updated as normal. If they're not trained and qualified, send them home. Here's talking about the task again, so I can review the RAMs should I need to, so I can still view those from the document here. Here I can still bring in any isolation should I want to. Safety escort required. Yes, the safety escort is required. And I'm filling that in on the safety precaution checklist as well. Kit check, please, guys. Show me you've got all the things that you need. And by the way, there in the boxes, there are your face screens and there are your gloves. Please wear those when you're not actively wearing your visors, for example. So you can specify those things that are added in there. Yes, everybody's got everything that they want to have. So now we're in a situation where I can either generate that paper permit and then give a copy to the contractor. I would physically sign it. I'd hand him my pen. He would physically sign it and then wander off with it in his back pocket. We may have another copy pinned up at the place of work. So paper everywhere. Or we can now go down the path of electronically signing these permits. So we're now in a position where we want to electronically sign this. And I'm going to sign it with Howard. And Steve Chandler is now picking it up. So I can now generate that permit. And now I have a PDF version of the permit document, which I can open up. There's a PDF copy of that document, and it shows me signatures, checklists, all completed. The grey areas are your liability statements, so whatever statements you need to put in or you have on your documents at the moment, saying that Faria Howard is signing off that he's personally checked the safety precautions are in place, and Steve is saying I accept the responsibility of the work. Whatever you need them to be, they again can be integrated within your permit document. I can now email that to Steve so that Steve will have a copy of the permit and also a copy of the RAMs on his smartphone, tablet, whatever device that he has with him. So that has now been done. We've both signed it off, and we can now issue that permit. So as from the permit office, I'm issuing that permit. Now when we come to the hotworks, we can have a different situation, and I'm afraid I can't simulate a mobile phone video in the demonstration. So I need you to just imagine the process here. So I'm the prover for the hotworks in this instance, and I could be sitting in my office. Steve Chandler is now downstairs. He's made a WhatsApp video call to me, and we're now looking at the place of work. So I'm looking at that place of work on my screen. Okay, Steve, we need to go and check all the things in the safety checklist. So first of all, have the sprinklers been isolated in the work area? Please go show me the video clip of that. Okay, yeah, we're both happy that that's been done. Have the fire detection systems been isolated? Yes, I know that because I can see that on my panel. At least 2 engineers or a hose reel immediately available. Is that the case within the place of work where you're watching? Yes, they are. Have the gas cylinders been properly secured? Yes, they have. We've both seen it now on the video clip. Have the floors been swept clean? Yes. And we can fill it in, go through that checklist as we go. Once we've done that, Steve, I'm happy. Are you happy with the place of work? Okay, let me just check you've got all the PPE again, please, before we go through the process. Yes, I can see you've got everything that you're supposed to have. Thank you. I'm happy to issue this permit. Are you happy to receive it? Yes, you are. Great. Okay, so we're going to save the data. I'm now signing this, Steve, and I'm signing this now from my office. Steve will have his smartphone. He'll be able to log in and just pick up this document, and he will be able to sign it off himself. Okay, so that's all been done. I'm now in a position where I can close this out. Now, Steve, before I issue this permit, I need you to uh, sign. Generate. Sorry, generate the permit. That's what I need to do. I apologise. I knew something had gone wrong somewhere. So I've generated that permit document. And now if I review that document too, what we'll see is we've got all of the safety checklists filled in as we went through the process, and the two signatures are in place. Okay, Steve, so I'm now happy to do that. Close that page off, and now email me that video or send me that video now before I'm actually going to click the issue. As soon as I've received that, I know I can now upload that into ePermits. I now issue that permit. Steve, you can now start work. So I've been able to do and go through the issuing process without being in the same location. Now, yes, it could be deemed useful for the current situation, but also in reality, when you have unmanned sites, this sort of process is going to be even more applicable in the real world when we get outside of this current situation, because you're not having an AP on site at every place. So getting the contractors to video the place of work, going through the safety checklist with them together, and then both of you signing it off is a way of doing it. So we've now got what we call open permits. So these are now live jobs. When it comes to the end of the process, Steve again can call me up. I'm sitting in my office. We're going to go through the close process. Okay, Steve. So first of all, now start to show me the place of work. I want to make sure everything's happy. I could go through whatever audit that I want to. It could be another safety checklist saying is everything switched back on or whatever, though that'll probably be done within the isolation permit process. But if I'm happy and I've seen everything within that environment, I can now get Steve to again send me that video clip. I can upload it into ePermits, and we can now go through and sign. So Steve is going to sign this off now. And now Howard is actually going to sign it off as well. I can now view that final permit, and now this view of it is the copy that would actually be archived away within the system. So you have got the full permit document with all of the signatures, all of the safety checklists, and all signatures, all time stamped and date stamped. This is the document that gets archived. So again, I've still been able to go through that process of actually closing out the permit without physically being in the same place at the same time. Just adds that little bit of extra safety in the current situation. So I can now close that permit off. Similarly, I can close out the access permit when I go back to the front desk. I go through the same process. I sign the permits off. I can store away the PDF. I don't need to view it all the time. And then I can actually go and close that permit out. So that's taken us through that process in effect. Now, if there are any questions on that, by all means you can contact me and we can discuss any questions that you have. But we did have put out a notification that if anybody had questions they wanted to pose in advance of the webinar, we could actually go through them on the day. Sorry, something seems to have sort of gone wrong with my system here, so I should just look at it on the slides. So first of all, we had a question from Nigel. How do you ensure that risk assessments and method statements are being followed when you're not on site to monitor the works? Now, when I get this type of question from clients in general, I normally sort of ask back, well, what do you do now? How do you ensure that work's being done properly and according to the risk assessments and method statements when you're not on site? Because whatever process you currently deploy can be replicated in the ePermits environment. However, you can, as we've seen, use video link to go through a random job audit. So you'll have an audit tool. So when you go down and you do spot checks on contractors, you'll probably go through and fill in an audit checklist. Do that audit checklist electronically and upload that audit checklist to ePermits. You contact the customer and get them to show you a video link of what the place of work is like at that time and checking that they're actually doing the things that they're supposed to do. So there's nothing really in e-permits that can specifically help with that activity. It's not actually tracking work that's taking place at the time, but it will help you in terms of the overall process. We also had a number of questions from Carl. These were covering operational and commercial activities. So first of all, is this a web-based system? But I've actually put answers against each of them, so we'll pick them off one at a time. So the first question was, is it a web-based system or does it run on our servers? ePermit is a cloud solution. I mean, technically it could be installed on client ones, but there are several issues that if it is installed on a client's own servers, there are some potential issues. Firstly, we would need to have access to your servers to do support and maintenance. And we do product development in what we call a sprint process. So every couple of weeks, we make little tiny mods, little tiny changes in enhancements and so forth. Above and beyond the major enhancements we do on new module releases and all the new stuff that we've talked about today coming through. So we need to be able to access your servers to provide support. That sort of thing gives the IT guys a little bit of the jitters. There would obviously be additional costs for client-specific support and maintenance. Are IT happy that third-party contractors would actually be accessing the client servers? Because when they're logging in to complete permit requests and so forth. And with regard to that development, we update it every 2 weeks. Given all of these other points, we'd probably only be able to provide client server-based updates on a minimum of a 6 monthly basis. And then there'd be a complex process to go through as how do those updates get installed? How does everything get checked? So as a cloud-based solution, we don't need to worry about that. We have one version of the software. We update it usually about 2 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday or something, and it runs for a couple of minutes, or we give warnings about downtimes, and then the system's updated. There are always release notes within the system, so you can see exactly what changes are going to be made at any particular time. Second question is there a license fee for using? Unfortunately, yes, there has to be, but it's licensed on an annual basis for software hosting and support. And they're either based on one of three methods. If you've just got one or two buildings and they're sort of similar size, so you might have a couple of buildings in London, or one in London, one in Manchester, we can look at using what we call a building license if they're fairly similar. We have campus licenses for multiple buildings, all different sizes and use, but they're in the same geographic location. And this works well for the obvious things like universities, hospitals, and so forth, where there's multiple buildings. Some of them used a lot. Some of them, like warehouses, could be absolutely huge, but not used a lot in terms of permitting. And then finally, if you've got multiple buildings of all different size and use in different geographic locations, we do it on a cost per square meter basis. So many of our banking clients, for example, where they've got different things ranging from big corporate offices in central London to smaller offices out in France, South Africa, all over the world, it's done on a cost per square meter basis, because then the cost for each building, or the cost allocation to each building, is basically based on the size. And size is an indicator of sometimes the amount of permitting that's going to be done. So depending on what your situation, we would price it in one of these ways. Is there a limit on the number of people that can access e-permits? No, it's not a seat-based licensing model. As I say, any health and safety system that's licensed by bums on seats, there'll be a bean counter somewhere upstairs saying cut down the number of users and cut down the cost of the system, and then you're opening yourselves up to unnecessary risk. So it's 1 or 1,001 or even 1,000,001 users is entirely up to you. As many people as need to access the system can access the system. The next question was what types of permits can be issued. Well, you saw within the system that there was a tabulated list of all the different types of permits that are in there. So we do access, or some people call them authorization to work permits, and that's the root permit. So every high-risk permit sits underneath one of those. And we've got electrical, LV, HV, confined space, work at height, hot works, as you saw. But there's a number of other specialist permits that we have in the system that we've developed sometimes for particular clients. So excavation, refueling of airplanes is one that we've done recently, sanctions to test, and there's a general permit that can be purposed for whatever you need it to be purposed for. We also do isolations, as you saw, mechanical, electrical, fire systems, etc. So we provide a standard permit template, which we showed you when we pulled off and generated those final permits. It can be branded, or it can be customized to include your own safety checklists, and we can even undertake the projects to configure the resulting documents to be an exact replica of what you currently have. The next question was, if it's a client system, can contractors and tenants log on and raise permit requests? Yes, everybody's pushing towards contractors actually putting in the permit requests. So as a cloud solution, they're not logging on to a client system, and there are no internal IT security issues. They can raise their permit requests in the process that you saw me do a while back, and they're then submitted to the appropriate approvers. You can create permit requests on behalf of your contractors if you want to, and most of our clients have a mix of both. So typically the small specialist contractors, they may not be geared up to interacting with web-based systems. So you can create those permit requests for them. But the bigger guys all use e-permits. We've got thousands of contractors already using the e-permit system, and their data's already installed. Next question was, is there any limit to the size of attachments that can be uploaded to a permit request? No, there's no limit to the size of documents that can be uploaded. However, at this time, there's no upload capability at the permit request stage. Typically, in that stage, people are referring to RAMs as the documents that need to be provided with the request. RAMs have their own permit workflow. So if I didn't have RAMs, when you saw me selecting RAMs from the list, if I selected to do a job where RAMs didn't exist, I wouldn't be able to proceed any further with the permit request. I'd need to go through the ePermits RAMs workflow process and submit RAMs to your organization. They again will be routed through workflow to the right people. And once they've signed them off and they're then approved and they're in ePermits, next time I go to that permit request page, I will then find in the pull-down menu the RAMs that are applicable and have been approved for the job. So typically it's RAMs that people are talking about at the permit request stage, and that's handled differently. Can permits be printed out and given to a security company? Yes, they can be printed and then issued to the contractor on arrival. Copies can be made available at the place of work. You wet sign the process, and at the end of the process where you saw me uploading, or you could upload documents, as you close a permit out, they can be scanned and uploaded into ePermits to complete the job. So it's been through the process, everybody's signed it, you actually just scan it and upload it. And his final question was, does it have the ability of electronic signatures? Yes, as you see in the demonstration. It enables a paperless process through the issue and close. And then the final signed documents are ones that are archived within the system. So hopefully you found that of interest. My details are there on the screen. If anybody needs to contact me or has any further questions on that, by all means do so. There is a chat tab that you will see on your screen while you're attending the webinar. If anybody has a burning question they want to ask now, I will shut up for 1 minute and give you a chance to put them in. It doesn't look like anybody's typing furiously, so that either means I have successfully answered all of your questions in the process, or you want to ask me them at a later date. And please feel free, contact me on the email address. I can give you a call back and we can chat it through. So thank you very much indeed, everybody, for listening. I hope you found it interesting, and take care and stay safe. Thanks very much.